Okay, and to put this quackery into the dust, we will read from men mutilated as adults while they tell the truth. This is one of the things that Quack told me. He said, you don't know any guys that have experienced both, and I do. And I'm like, I've been doing this for 14 years. I've literally talked to hundreds of men that were circumcised as adults and complain about it and know the truth. And we're going to read some of them. Some of these are people I've actually talked to. This is Kenneth Watt. My senior chief on board my last duty station in the Navy committed suicide after getting circumcised at 38 years old because he couldn't handle the fact that he made a bad decision. It ruined his sexual experience. His words. Bill Sussman. As someone who was circumcised at 16, I can tell you definitely lose at least half of the feeling with the gliding mechanism. Please stop this from happening. It's not unhealthy or unclean. I was fine for 16 years without even paying much attention to it. So why did you have it done? They lied to me and I didn't understand. Who? Your parents? Doctors? Both. Doctors lied to my parents and they didn't understand. So you feel like you lost one half or actually more sensation? If what is one half a conservative estimate? Because I have met other men circumcised as adult and they claim they have lost more than one half. 75% of the nerves are gone. One man told me that he lost 75% of the overall sensation, but the fact that he had left was muted, uncomfortable, and the orgasm sensation was limited to the underside of the glands as opposed to being able to feel it intensely. The following is some ammo for intactivists when we get encountered with, I'm circumcised and I'm better this way, or more importantly, my baby will be circumcised so his future girlfriend will like it better. For 35 years, my penis was as it came, uncircumcised. After 30 years in the natural state, I allowed myself to be persuaded by a physician to have the foreskin removed. Not because of any problems at the time, but because, in the physician's view, there might be problems in the future. That was 5 years ago, and I'm sorry if I had it done from I'm sorry I had it done from my standpoint, from what my female sex partners and from what my female sex partners have told me. They also have a reduction in the pleasure, and you can look at a book called sexisnatureintended.com online for free, and it'll explain to you how this happens. For myself, the sensitivity in the glands has been reduced by at least 80%. There is unprotected, constant rubbing against the fabric of whatever I was wearing. In a sense, has become calloused. Intercourse is now, as we used to say about older, heavier condoms, like washing your hands with your gloves on. Masturbation for me has lost many of the dimensions it once had. With the foreskin over the glands, I could masturbate to orgasms at a leisurely pace, or I could pull back the foreskin and using natural lubricants, which seeped out, speed up the process. Manual manipulation of my penis by my female partners. Now they can't do as much. The options in fellatio are also sharply reduced. I seem to have a relatively unresponsive stick where I once had a sexual organ. That was from Anonymous, the kindest cut of all, Playgirl, July 1979, page 108. Okay, yep, my uncle did it later, and it was the worst mistake of his life. He lost the feeling most boys who had it done don't even know what they're missing. He said it really changes. Alicia Trenda. As someone who's unnecessarily circumcised, sexually mutilated for phimosis in my teens, I know the fact that circumcision absolutely destroys sexual pleasure. Phimosis never requires circumcision. Fact, overkill, medical negligence. Without a ridge band of sensual nerves, which every circumcision destroys, males are unable to feel any amount of normal sexual pleasure that they were supposed to have with a prepuce. Very few circumcised men can feel anything at all. Anything, but most think it's normal, as if they were cut. At birth, they have to pretend like they like whatever their parents and society left them with. Male circumcision has always been about sexual suppression of males, and circumcised men have lost the most pleasurable parts of their penis. Because these men have sex can get erections, ergo they must enjoy it. No, these men have never known what foreskin feels like. I can tell you, having experienced both, that circumcision kills pleasure dead. A man without a foreskin can't enjoy sex like they should because there's no ridge band in the frenula delta to work with. The glans penis is virtually insensitive. Sad that many don't understand what circumcision really is and how it explains this society with men being systematically indoctrinated. And you will see the reaction of men to this. Denial, defensive. Our society would not be like this without male denial and its presence everywhere. They fear to realize how emasculated they really are while they try to emulate a false masculinity. It would hurt their egos to find out the truth. Denial explains the decadence of society and why men don't react historically. Because you have to ask yourself, how did men let this happen otherwise? Will circumcision show us how it is possible to rape them, emasculate them, kill them, and steal everything from men? Just think, you will be arrested in jail for years for looking at photographs of naked children, but you could strap down a naked baby boy and attack his genitals with mutilating implements, and if you're a mohel, you can fellatiate the boy's mutilated afterwards, called matitza b'peh. Society is mad and people are sick. Lawrence Newburn. Michael Wicks. Please follow the advice in the comments for stretching. I made the mistake at 30 of not researching on how to solve a tight foreskin and let a doctor and my friends convince me to be circumcised. I regret it from that moment to 40 years later when I started to restore. Throw that doctor out of your life and follow those in this group who know how to deal with stuff like that. Percy J. As a man who was circumcised as a young adult for non-medical reasons, I can honestly say that my sexual pleasure went way down after getting circumcised. I was an idiot and believed in the U.S. medical system's information that circumcision has benefits for me. In my defense for my stupidity, back when I got circumcised, there wasn't much information on the subject and the internet was really underdeveloped, so I couldn't Google it. It took about 2 to 3 years after the circumcision for me to fully realize how much sensation you lose from the head of the penis, callousing and drying out. Most of the sensation loss occurred in the first year and a half post-op, and then I lost a bit more over the next couple years. So that I could feel most of the studies that just focus on men a few months post-ops are simply too short. They need to follow the men longer. I would say about 3 years would be good, because that's when the cost more money and time. But that costs more money and time. I can't really relate to a man actually thinking circumcision would improve his sexual pleasure years after the procedure. But I can relate to it as if it is within maybe a year or two, possibly, because it feels so different to be circumcised that it's kind of exciting for a while. I'm definitely not circumcising my children, since circumcision actually absolutely lowered the quality of my sex life and thus has affected my life in general. So a lot of these men that are circumcised, that have phimosis, they never really experienced sexual pleasure with a fully functioning prepuce because it has to evert. Okay, Drew K says, totally agree. Got circumcised at 18 just to be like everyone else. Sensitivity was most definitely decreased. Penis head has become noticeably rough and dry as time goes on. Vladimir Pechanek. I know young Russian who came to the USA as an immigrant, believing that in America everything must be better, believed that circumcision is healthier, cleaner, etc. He also complied with this American standard. Asked a few years later, he said it was the worst decision he ever made in his life. Next person, Max Piera. I got cut at 34. Worst decision of my life. Regret it every day. Sex is now a duty because I have to for relief. It's not for the enjoyment and pleasure like before. Don't do it. Most intact men have not realized how much of their sensitivity comes from the foreskin. The sensitive parts of the foreskin membrane, the ridge band and frenulum, feel like they are the glands. Basically, what he's saying, what most men think the glands is the most sensitive part when it's not. He's saying that the ridge band, the frenulum are actually the glands. It requires considering penile sensitivity more carefully than most men have to realize just how much of the penile sensitivity comes from the foreskin. It is important because most intact men don't support the intactivism as much as they would if they realize how devastating circumcision would be for themselves. They naively assume that it would be not that bad because most men don't complain. I know that this happens because I am describing my own experience. Even after I got into intactivism, it was quite a while before I realized how much of the sensitivity I thought of as the glands was actually the foreskin. Most men in intact foreskin need to be shaken from our complacent stupor about circumcision just as much as circumcised men. Most men with intact foreskin need to be shaken from our complacent stupor about circumcision just as much as circumcised men. The men, none of them, even the doctors, none of them know the anatomy, structure, and function. They don't know it. Even the men with the part. Even doctors with the part. Okay. As a male who was circumcised at 29 is now 31, can say with 100% certainty, it was the absolute worst choice I ever made. I did it because I wanted to fit in, so to speak. It's based on crap science and cultural norms. After having living both sides, circumcision is as evil as eugenics. Woods on writer as eugenics. And that was an anonymous. An Arkansas man broke into tears at our protests in Fort Smith last year. A urologist and conned him into circumcision. He had lost all sensation in his penis. I was a Soviet Jew who chose to get circumcised after making Ayala to Israel. Now I regret it. There is a beyondthebris.com. There is an article. It says, I regretted my circumcision. Maybe if I had no comparison before and after, being circumcised wouldn't bother me. But I know what it was like before, how it felt, and I cannot forget what I lost. Today I have two sons. They were both born in 1990. They were born in 1998 and 2001, and neither is circumcised. I comfort myself with the thought that if I did not have this experience, I probably would have circumcised them. So at least for them, it's good. I learned about circumcision from my own flesh. I am not only the man who regrets being circumcised as an adult. I'm not the only man who regrets being circumcised as an adult. Hilo Glazier wrote an important article for Haaretz, and it's another Jewish newspaper, about many Soviet Jews who came to Israel, got circumcised, and regret it. There's also a massive campaign to circumcise men of Africa. Many of these men also regret it. Yaakov Weiser, Jewish man's mother protected him, but he chooses to be mutilated as an adult. They felt pressure to get circumcised after moving to Israel. Now they regret it. Tens of thousands of teen men and boys and men from former Soviet Union were herded into Israeli operating rooms beginning in the 90s to undergo circumcisions. Years later, they recall the resulting trauma and pain and the damage wrought on their sex lives. Okay, at this point, didn't imagine the surgery would have far-reaching consequences. It took a few years for me to understand that I had lost something. At first, you don't get it. A girl goes down on you and it's terrific, and then another one goes down on you and it's less terrific. As time progresses, you understand that there was something you had really enjoyed at one time, but suddenly it just becomes routine sex. It's not only an oral sex. The feeling is 180 degrees difference. In someone who's not circumcised, the tip of the sexual organ is covered with super delicate moist tissue. If you don't have the covering and it's constantly touching your clothing, it becomes less sensitive over time. It's something else. People who get circumcised at 8 days have no clue. Try to give me a clue. Okay, if you train in a gym without gloves, you get blisters on your hands. When you peel off the blister, the contact with the exposed skin hurts. But when you touch the skin before peeling it off, it's a regular feeling. That's the gap. You know how if you touch there a second after you come, you shake all over? So for someone who's not circumcised, it can be a constant feeling. You feel it in your entire body. It's that sensitive. The real difficulties begin after recuperation, Zisler relates. When the skin beneath the foreskin was exposed and started to rub against my clothes, it hurt really bad. It started to use certain aids, like putting a piece of cotton in my underpants. During masturbation, there was quite a rapid deterioration in sexual sensation. But the time, I didn't attach any importance to that. Before being circumcised, I was sexually active. I thought that when I returned being sexually active, the feeling would be the same. A few years later, Zeiser abandoned religion. At the age of 23, I started having relations again and realized and discovered that the sexual pleasure had changed very much for the worse. The experience was weaker. It was unpleasant in that particular place, that I would say that it was even painful. Over the years, my erection grew weaker. I think the last time I had sexual relations with penetration was in 2000. When I am about to have intercourse, I think about how to overcome this difficulty. The problem isn't only in the sexual organ. The mind adds to interpretation to the physical trauma. And until recently, decided to talk openly about the subject. Zisler says, until not long ago, I never talked about it. I was ashamed to say that I was impotent. Now, at my ripe old age, I have decided to open up about my experience and take a stand for the sake of others. Zisler claims his distress is becoming a campaigner against circumcision, but similar experience leads some men to withdraw socially. So, yeah.
I didn't know anything about the anatomy. Like I told him, they keep it secret for a reason. I mean, now just recently it all comes out, but they still say, they still lie, and they still don't, on mainstream media, you can't get the truth. But I was 18, and before I went to college, I got circumcised because I didn't even know what it was. I knew, the penis felt good because it felt a lot good. I did know that, but the doctor lied to me. He said, sex will be better too.
Yeah.
And see, they lie. I mean,
right.
Of course, it ruined everything. And I was mind controlled, brainwashed to doing this thing to myself because I didn't think, I didn't know how horrific it was. Then I realized what it was, and my parents are doing to babies, and it's like, then you learn about it, and it's like you live in the Twilight Zone. It really is.
You have a powerful story, man.
They lied. The Hollywood movies joke around with it. They purposely have the writers that put that in movies to mock intact men.
Can you comment on the before and after feeling?
It's like losing your eyesight. I'm not, or like losing tasting food, not being able to taste food anymore, going blind. It really was. You lose all the fine touch, specialized nerves that makes what is the purpose of sex.
Wow.
That's the purpose of circumcision, though, to destroy it.
Yeah, did you hear that, Daniel?
But that's why they do it to babies, because it's mind control as soon as you're born. Because kids aren't going to talk about this to their parents because they don't even know when they're. I mean, everybody had to learn about this themselves, through. I mean, even people wouldn't know now if the truth didn't come out. Yeah. So they purposely kept it secret.
Yeah, you would think a urologist of all people would know better. He's the one, or she has the one that has studied the anatomy more than anyone else.
Or they're following orders. That's all I could say.
So then they must have been lying to you, because they ought to know different or better.
Well, they're following orders. They're paid to tell people this. That's the thing. You can't trust. They are purposely paid to tell people.
Yeah, they're glorified salespeople for their hospital or clinic they work at.
That's all they are. They're not.
They're shareholders.
Okay, here's a true story reported by the BBC News. It was a 23-year-old man who had no case of mental illness, had a normal life, and he took his own life after a circumcision. And so what started, he had phimosis. We've talked about this numerous times, how phimosis is most likely iatrogenically caused by doctors teaching forced retraction to ignorant mothers. And forced retraction is built off this extreme hygiene fear that men are somehow dirty and ooey and disgusting, and that we're hard to clean so they actually do this thing called forced retraction, where they'll pull the tissue back, and it's not supposed to be pulled back because it's adhered to the glands, to this tissue. Anyways, without getting into a whole science on that, this is completely reversible with stretching. Easily, so there's the image right here of femocure.net. You can completely cure phimosis with stretching. And so he had tight phimosis and tight foreskin. Now, here's the thing. Most men who have, if you have extreme phimosis, a lot of those men have no idea what normal sexual function feels like because they've only experienced sexual function through the outside. This tissue is supposed to evert, revealing the inner most sensitive parts, the frenulum and ridge band, and the inner mucosa, which is the most sensitive part. And that's the pleasurable part. So if you have phimosis, you've never had full. If you had phimosis as you were a child, you've never had full function. You've never experienced full function. So a lot of these men that they'll go and they'll get circumcised as adults for phimosis, they say their sexual experience is better. And these are the men that were circumcised as adults, and then they claim it's better. And that's the only the only place that comes from, and also from denial patterns. A lot of men are have been lied to or coerced or body shamed, or it's a cultural norm that we perpetuate through myths and lies and distractions and delusions, like this doctor here. But anyways, so you had phimosis, a tight foreskin. It created issues in the bedroom and it caused awkward moments. It was not life-threatening and not urgent. The doctor visit, he goes to a specialist. I think this was in Canada. So he's from Great Britain. He immediately suggested circumcision. He asked about the alternatives. I asked about stretching. He completely lied to my face and said it would not work for me, which is ridiculous because it works for everybody that has mitosis, which is the ability for your skin to grow. So the decision is he trusted the doctor. He felt he was the expert, so I accepted it. He couldn't do his research properly, and he was too embarrassed to ask. He made a permanent decision without fully understanding. Apparently his laptop had been broke at the time, and he was embarrassed to ask anybody. So he had the surgery at age 21, believed it was minor, a routine fix. The turning point, it became apparent what had just happened was a catastrophe. Not a mild regret, a catastrophe. The aftermath, physical. He spent months in constant pain. Constant stimulation to the head of his penis, no longer protected by his foreskin, which he called torture. Imagine what would happen if your eyeball had the eyelid amputated. Functional loss, he experienced erectile dysfunction. He experienced burning, itching sensations from his scar from where his frenulum was removed. He was also experiencing cramps that extended into his abdomen. And what he felt was taken. Alex felt the most erogenous, sensitive parts of his penis and male body overall had been taken from him. Are you listening to this, doctor? This kid committed suicide because of these delusions that you quacks are pushing. Suicide. Your lies don't come without repercussions. When you quacks lie about this stuff, and the consensus is The consensus is a bunch of men coping. That's what the consensus is. The consensus is being led by a cabal of circumfetish pedophiles, as I proved on the previous... I shouldn't say that. I said it in the previous video. So his own words, I once had a sexual organ. I now have been left with a numb, botched stick. My sexuality has been left in tatters. Now, I could imagine what it would have been like to have my whole body, but I know that what I have is a numb, botched stick. And it wasn't so sore, well, I guess you would say it wasn't botched like in the sense, but every man who's had this done is lacking the main sensory tissue. That's not a consensus, that's a fact. And if you're lacking the tissue, you're obviously missing the sensation. So anyways, the reality is it's not just skin, it's not just cosmetic, it has function, it has sensation, it has sexual experience. Silence. So he told no one. Not his family, not his friend. He carried alone. In his final message, scheduled after his death, he said, I know that I went peacefully, and I'm now in a state of peace that was impossible following this mutilation. I died in 2015, not now. Let that sink in. 2015, he had surgery. Not when he physically died, when he believed something inside him was lost. Final, a young man, common condition, a trusted system, walks in, trusts the experts, walks out with his sexual function was permanently reduced. And the world calls this minor. It's just crazy. This kid knew what he lost, even with phimosis. Even with phimosis, he knew what he lost. It's unbelievable that we have quacks lying about histology studies, and the doctor's like, oh, there's salamander eyes, and I'm like, you're talking about vestigial tissue that we understand has been kind of like lost its importance in evolution, and then the salamander no longer needs its vision, so it loses its need of that eyesight. This is a tissue that's on literally the outside of the most sensitive, pleasurable, nerve-dense tissue of your sex organ. And it's directly interfacing with the partner. And it's full of these nerve endings. To sit there and say this has no effect on sexual function is mind-bogglingly stupid and ridiculous that I even have to make these claims. It's so crazy that I have to tell people not to take a knife to a child's genitals, to take clamps and knives and crush off part of their child and throw it in a dustbin, or have Oprah pick it up so she can make a little bit more money to pay for all those mortgages that she has selling Skin Medica, so Sandra Bullock can have less lines and wrinkles on her faces. So doctors like you can pretend to be superior when you're just completely ridiculous and lack fundamental common sense. And this ridiculous lies of a societal norm that have been ingrained into scientific research has no validity whatsoever. Coping strategies, psychological coping studies of men coming up with excuses to mutilate babies, justifying their sexual loss of function with denial, perpetuating disgusting behaviors on children, violating the human rights of little babies for a disgusting social norm, and then lying to the men about it and gaslighting us. It's crazy. It's crazy. Doctor, you lose the debate. You lost the debate from video 1. This is number 4 videos. I had to break up one of them. So I guess and count it on Instagram, it'll be 5 videos. But I mean, I could keep going. I'm going to go, thanks to your, I'm gonna keep you as my my mascot, my fanboy. You're gonna be my new fanboy. I'm gonna drag you along, Doctor. I'm gonna bring you to every event. I'm gonna put your face everywhere with those duck lips, and you're gonna just be quacking away in the background. I'm gonna make you my little mascot. my little fanboy mascot, and it's going to be fun. So the next one I talk about Brian. Let's see, what else was the other one I was going to do? Oh, we're gonna literally go into Brian Morris's pseudoscience studies and show you the circular reasoning, show you the subjective nonsense and the reliance on these subjective, coping strategies of men that have been mutilated. A pretty high percentage of men that can't accept basic anatomical facts, which is beyond logical comprehension, and into just pure coping strategy, pure cultural delusions, pure nonsense, and pure evil. Because this hurts children. The lies of these quacks hurt children. Last thing I wanted to mention is in the description of this video, there are a bunch of YouTube videos I've linked to, so you can listen to more men talk about this. It takes real men to stand up, to be honest and truthful with ourselves, and not make ridiculous delusions like things that microscopes have found don't actually function the way they're supposed to function, because if that was the case, then it would hurt my feelings kind of stuff. Like this doctor who's who's all over my page. It's so hilarious. It's the most ludicrous debate I've ever had in my life. This is outrageously ridiculous. Comments of this quack are just ludicrous. He says histology has no influence on determining the function of a tissue, but where histology is literally the study of tissue. So the actual tissue itself, the actual structure has no effect on function. That's literally denying structure and function have an influence on each other, and he's denying that. He says that, I'm not denying that the parts exist. I'm just denying that they don't contribute to sexual function. Well, your lips contribute to sexual function. Your hands can contribute to that. And then he says, so every time that nerve fires, that means it's sexual function. So therefore, he said some weird shit about me and children, which really pissed me off. And was just so outrageous that I'm like, why would you even bring that up? Knowing that he's actually bringing up the lies of certain fetishes to justify his irrational, ridiculous, unscientific, biologically denying, anatomy denying delusions that make absolutely no sense, because it's built on consensus of mutual quacks that happen to have very nefarious and disgusting ulterior motives and are lying about conflict of interest. So, goodbye, doctor. Let's see you the next time.